Welcome everyone and happy Wednesday. I will give it a minute to give attendees an opportunity to join. Hello, I'm Melissa, Construction Success Manager here at Fieldwire. I'd like to thank you for joining us today to our live webinar for Fieldwire for Lean Construction. To kick things off, just some housekeeping announcements. A reminder that this webinar will be recorded. A copy of the recording along with the slide deck will be emailed to you at the conclusion of the session. To keep things on track, attendees will be muted throughout the session. You may input your comments in the chat and questions in the Q&A panes. We will try our best to get to all your questions during the session and at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. For any questions that we don't address during this session, we will have one of our experts reach out to you directly. We will also be sending out a survey after this webinar where you can provide your feedback on today's session and let us know how we did and how we can improve in future webinars. With that, I'll pass this over to your speaker and construction expert, Kendra Sutherland. Kendra, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's webinar on Fieldwire for Lean Construction. To kick things off, I'll do a quick introduction. My name is Kendra. I'm a dedicated construction success manager here at Fieldwire, and I work with some of our largest customers to support them in using Fieldwire and being successful on the platform. So whether that's trainings or workflow consultations, I'm a dedicated point of contact for them to ensure that they're successful. And I'm a product expert, but I also did come from the construction industry. I spent 10 years before coming to Fieldwire in the construction industry in various capacities, from estimating to project engineer in both commercial construction and high-end residential landscape construction. So I'm really happy to be here today with our special guest, Kelly Anderson, CEO and founder of Jenco Electric. Jenco Electric was founded in 1990 and has provided design, installation, maintenance, and control engineering services to the Phoenix and Tucson areas for the last 30 years. So Kelly was a core member of the Arizona Lean Construction Institute for several years, which enabled him to gain knowledge in applying Lean in his own business and to forge relationships with Lean practitioners. And I'm really excited to bring Kelly on because I actually was the dedicated construction solutions manager for Jenco for a year, and I got to witness firsthand how that company really applies Lean. So it's my true pleasure to welcome you, Kelly. Thanks for joining. And if you can share with us, a little bit about how your journey with Lean started and some of the reasons you wanted to do this webinar, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm the CEO and founder, Kendra. Thanks for having me. So a learning organization has been part of our philosophy here at Jenco our whole 32 years. And when I fell into the body of knowledge called Lean, it was obvious to me that it could be enterprise wide and everyone could contribute to the success of the business. So that was where I really got started studying Lean and listening to people in other industries using Lean and so on. And then LCI got going and they started trying to apply those principles in the construction world and seeing the deviations from our world to a manufacturing plant. So that was always pretty fascinating to me. So how helping men and women that work in our industry earn a better living and have a better career path than just a dead end road construction job, as a lot of people like to say, is kind of crazy. And lean solving a lot of those problems of helping people do that. And so anyway, I agreed to do this because part of lean philosophy is I think many of you know on the call, is it's about sharing your knowledge and interacting in a dialogue with people. It's a discourse, and it's a continuous discourse. And so it's a pleasure to interact with all you folks and just demonstrate how we apply a lot of our lean stuff using the Fieldwire platform.
Awesome. Well, we're really happy to have you and dive in to some of those workflows. So for today, we thought we would do just an overview of lean construction. One of the reasons I was so excited to do this webinar was because, lean construction really is at the forefront in some ways of innovation when it comes to team collaboration. And that's something we really focus on at Fieldwire and are very aligned with. So when you pair Fieldwire with lean construction principles, it's a very powerful combination, as Jenco has shown in some of their processes. And sometimes presentations on lean can just be really focused on philosophy and very little on the practical application. And I really wanted to make sure that we leave you all with some practical ways that you can apply lean on your projects on Fieldwire or in general today. So we'll be doing an overview, but a brief overview of lean construction, and hopefully demystifying it a little bit. It can be a bit of a buzzword. And then we'll spend most of the time in the product demo, looking at some of Jenco's workflows. And then there will be an opportunity, as Melissa said, for Q&A. At the end, we'll leave 10 minutes. So excited to jump in. So starting off with just an overview, a little bit of history, and a bit of a definition of what lean is. So as some of you may know, lean construction takes its roots in lean manufacturing, as Kelly was mentioning. So the term, lean manufacturing and lean was coined in 1988 by John Krafchick, but this was based on methods used by Toyota in the 1930s to eliminate waste in the manufacturing process. And it wasn't until about 1993, 3 years after Jenco was founded, that lean construction really emerged. And it's defined by the LCI today as, a project delivery process that uses lean methods of maximizing stakeholder value while reducing waste by emphasizing collaboration between teams on a project. And then I love this, the goal of lean construction is to increase productivity, profits, and innovation in the industry. So while these are relatively newer concepts in the last 50 years, I think it's important to note that lean process thinking is not something that's really that new. Lean process thinking is documented in the Venetian arsenal in the 1450s. And it's really a philosophy. So, it's not just one thing. It's not one recipe. It's a philosophy. And even Henry Ford's flow production systems dating back to 1913 demonstrate lean process thinking. So while it's a newer concept for the construction industry, these concepts are not new, and the guiding values of lean are really respect for people and continuous improvement. And then based on those, whatever methods are used to achieve those goals can be considered lean practices. So I have a number of them listed up here, a number of methods. You've got pull planning, Fieldwire, integrated project delivery, Six Sigma, and then also PDCA, which is known as Deming's cycle. And that's actually the area we're going to focus on most today. But before I continue, Kelly, is there anything you want to add to what we just covered for the overview and definition?
No, I just to add, I guess, to support what you're saying, say it differently, I guess, is lean to me. It's a whole body of knowledge that you can a la carte and still affect, all of those things you're intended to do, your productivity, your quality. Those are all things that all of these tools, practices, methodologies, all of these are aimed at that. It's not like, I mean, everyone has a different level in which they adopt all these things or sophistication that they go through, but there isn't like a common starting point or an end point. There isn't an end point, I guess, but there's definitely a lot of ways you could get involved, and it doesn't matter how sophisticated of a firm you have or unsophisticated of a firm. I think that's the cool thing about lean, is that you can get going with it and see results pretty easily with just adopting some of the tools or some of the practices.
Awesome. Well, we're going to see some of those now. And with our focus on PDCA, this has been a real core tool for Jenco, I guess for many years. And PDCA stands for plan, do, check, and act, or adjust, depending on where you check, adjust or act. And it's known as Deming's cycle. And it's basically an improvement cycle based on the scientific method of proposing a change in a process. And then you would basically implement the change, and then you measure the results and take appropriate action. So that's the scientific method that this cycle is based on. And we're going to look at each of these steps and how Jenco leverages Fieldwire to accomplish them. But before we do, Kelly, I'm curious, do you recall the first time you learned about Deming's cycle and why it remained with you as a foundation for Jenco's work?
Sure. So when I was a kid growing up, I was into sports, and I remember one of the coaches, one of the sports I was in, had stopwatches and all these things to do the check, how well are you doing? And this particular coach wanted to know, what you were thinking would improve your performance. In other words, you had a theory, which was your plan. And then of course, when you did your lap or whatever you did, then here comes the check piece after you've done the action. And so we were living that when we were kids. I mean, I don't know how that coach, I don't know where he's at. He's probably deceased by now, but in any case, that was it. And then years later, I ran into the formal introduction of scientific learning, I guess, in some of my studies and so on. But I ran into real top performers, and it seemed to me they always had a theory, which was their plan of how they thought things were going to work, and so on. So when they were doing strategic planning, they actually, were part of their plan was how are they going to confirm their assumptions, and through observation with metrics and so on was what they were driving at. And that was an action in itself that was in their plans. So anyway, that was very intriguing to me. And then the humbling piece, the last piece I'll share is I run into doing this 30 some years with a lot of people, all our field workers are in PDCA cycles all day long. We'll get into that later in this webinar, but I run into people that are reluctant to share their plan, like be transparent about it. And I say, get over it. We all are bad at planning. And the only way we get better at planning is to actually reveal what our intentions were and how we thought we were going to get to our goal, and then try to act on it. And then off you go. That is the learning cycle.
I'm so guilty of that. I love that. That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, so to kick things off with the plan stage, no matter how embarrassed you are of your plan, you all definitely do plan at Jenco. And one of the ways that you plan, I'd love to start with how you all start your projects, really proactively by planning the project. And so we'll look now at just how that looks. And your teams actually leverage the task importer. So at the start of a project, Jenco's projects, all of them, look something like this. I recreated a startup, kind of standard project startup list here of tasks that I imported using the task importer. I simply had my list here of things that I know need to happen on a project every time. I copied it and then I pasted it into the task importer and then I imported it. And what that list looks like is basically just, and I'll sort it by task number. So starting off with the project admin, just setting up the project in Fieldwire. This is something that has to happen every time. They need to update their categories based on the bid, update the milestone schedules, all the steps that need to happen. You know, construction has a fair amount of turnover, as you all are I'm sure are aware, and being able to have these processes laid out, I can imagine just gives you that peace of mind that each person's going to step into a very clear set of steps that they need to go through to properly set the job up all the way through closeout. So this covers, you know, the kickoff call. You've got the initial site survey form attached. You can review that, and then all the way through closeout. And I kid you not, this is how Jenco sets up their projects every time. And so I wanted to just ask you, Kelly, you know, what value has the task importer and being able to set up your project tasks like this each time provided to Jenco? And how did you do this before Fieldwire?
Well, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of stuff like that, but yeah, a lot of hassle, I'll say it that way. So before Fieldwire, but so we've been around, you've heard, you know, 3 decades, and we have a lot of, you know, pretty dedicated, intelligent people that are after it, trying to get better at what we do and serving our customers and our employees and all that. So that, with that in mind, we're you know, we're trying to learn. And so best practices and so on, they all have them, and so they're always debating, you know, what's essential on a job, you know, what task, what action is essential to driving the value to the customer and having consistent profits that we can forecast, that sort of thing. And so, you know, gathering all those and having them and sequencing them is you know, every enterprise has, you know, their secret sauce of actions they think are absolutely essential to driving the value to the customer. So, you know, why reinvent the wheel every time? So we start off with that, and it to a lot of people it can look like a checklist, and certainly it can behave that way too. But ours is a little more powerful. That's like the fabric of the job, and then that stimulates a lot of conversations about the stuff that's around that essential list. And we have jobs. We just finished a large manufacturing facility. We're an electrical contractor, but we finished a large job, and my foreman, 1 month in the job, had 400 defined tasks to do throughout the life cycle of that job that interrelated to the essential stuff and was real field stuff, but also related to the office of the support he needed for the resources to do those tasks. So that in a nutshell is how we started doing it. And at every kickoff, we do edit it. So on some jobs, some things are not applicable. Occasionally, most of it is, but some things are not. And so we edit that out, and then off we go. But importing it, it makes it real clean and clear right up front what the essential stuff is to the team.
Wow, that's awesome. And then it sounds like you're, yeah, just to demo here, like you could, I noticed that you have it broken down kind of by which team would do it, either the project admin, or is it a field item, or, you know, a safety. So the categories would allow you to see those different, you know, focus in on who's responsible.
Sure, swim lanes might be a good way to see that, everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's awesome. So that's all well and good to plan proactively, but another really core piece of lean philosophy is getting buy-in and commitment. And I know that Jenco has really, you've spoken a lot about this, Kelly, you know, just getting commitment from your teams and your producers, because it's all well and good to have a plan of what you want to do and have all these tasks, but if people don't agree to commit and do those tasks, it's really for nothing. And so I wanted to show some techniques that are modeled on what you all do for getting that buy-in. And so one thing I noticed that Jenco has is you do have a status for unassigned, which I think really clearly lays a line in the sand of, this is something that needs to be done, but nobody has committed to it yet. It hasn't been assigned, and agreement hasn't been reached on this person being able to do that task. So I set up these tasks to kind of model that. So I have unassigned to do. This means, we figured out maybe who needs to do it, but they haven't yet committed to it. So I created this promised status. And then this could be also, if you don't want to give up your statuses to clearly lay out that commitment process, you could also have that live on the task itself using our custom task attributes. So here's a drop down for commitment stage. So if you use your task statuses for a different process or status mapping, then you could keep this here and basically say, this is unassigned, or say if it's promised, and then it would be clear that this is something someone has actually committed to.
Yep.
And I was just wondering, if you can talk a little bit about, getting commitment from your teams and how you recommend how this has worked for you and everything.
Sure. So I'll try to make this concise. It's a pretty profound question for us. So we share savings in the agreed to budget between the foreman, the project manager, and so on at the beginning of the pre-job planning with our field staff. So that's from helpers all the way up to general foreman, and they share in that savings from those budgeted dollars for labor, material, miscellaneous material, and the rentals. They all influence the cost of that. And so we're trying to share the savings they have through elimination of waste. So that's the context, the background in which all this conversation happens. So now how we get buy-in further, more specific, is our general foreman and foreman, they define what and oftentimes when, in the sense with interacting with the customer. So they need to install the light fixture by Friday. Then they go to a person that is generally called a journeyman. We still call them that too. And that journeyman, we also have them trained in using these tools and doing these processes of planning work. So they're now called a producer as well. So the producer takes the idea from their supervisor, the foreman or general foreman, and says, okay, I got to refine this what by when into the rest of the specifics of all the resourcing and so on. So all the how and the methodologies and all that, the safety concerns and so on. So they develop the plan here in Fieldwire. They do all that, and so they declare to the foreman, here's how I'm going to do it. Here are the resources, which can be other. It's not just an individual person. It can be, but it also can be a very small crew of 2, 3, 4 people the producer is now managing. So now they're just asking for permission to start executing the work from their supervisor. So now that it's their plan. And so, for instance, they need to be done by Friday, and the producer may say, well, that's 24 man hours of work to do by tomorrow. So therefore, I need 2 other people on my crew. Our foremen don't debate that much with their crew as far as the man hours needed. That's their plan. And if you start dictating to the subordinate how long it will take in the terms of man hours, that's where you lose the buy-in. So we go with that. And so we'll further this along as this webinar unfolds. We'll probably touch on how this goes from there. But that's the initial promise is it's made because the producer is actually developing the methodologies, the resources required, and it's their plan, and they're just asking for the supervisor to agree to it, and that it meets the supervisor's needs as far as the promises that person has made to our customer and to the other trades.
Totally, yeah, and that actually leads nicely into something I wanted to show just about kind of pull planning and creating that transparency on the job. So one of the things that I did with this Lean project demo project is I did create a milestone category or a status. So if I clear my filters, you can see the milestones. You can see the milestones are all in dark blue. And then that would allow you to view those milestones on our Gantt view here. You could also view it on calendar view, and it just really clearly lets you see that schedule that you were saying you share with your teams, because what this does is it provides that transparency of what the end goal is. It's not on somebody's computer somewhere, or only the project manager has access to the schedule and you don't get to know. This is something that everyone can see in the platform and be aware this is the target that we're in contract to reach. And so with that, using that status and that color, I really like that method because it lets me then visually see, against other tasks, I've got these tasks which are yellow, and that means promised. So I know that these tasks have been promised, and I'm filtering to the related milestone here, the rough-in wall framing inspection milestone. And I'm able to see that these tasks related to that, we're all following in line, except for the electrical layout. That one is still not promised, still not committed, it's unassigned. So that's our wild card. So we got to look into that. And then these are blank tasks that we could, if there's extra work we need to add to it, we can add those. Or in a pull planning session, you could focus in on each milestone and have each trade just add a category, update the dates, and create the cascade to see how you're going to reach that milestone. And to get this on Fieldwire, it was pretty simple. I just imported my schedule from, whatever program you use, maybe Microsoft Project. All you need is a title, some dates, and then you can create that related milestone custom task attribute dropdown on the task itself. I'll show you here. This is the related milestone, and it just matches your milestones. So I just created those, and I imported those using the task importer, and that allowed me to get my milestone schedule. And then I did multiple imports after that to just get a series of tasks for each of those milestones, which would set me up nicely for doing a session with different producers to say, please say all the things you need to do in order to reach this milestone. So those are just some ways that you could accomplish what Kelly's discussing on Fieldwire. And it kind of ties in with just an analogy you've used before of the Russian dolls. Can you talk a little bit about that analogy?
Sure. So nesting of Russian dolls, we've all seen that. So CPM schedule would be the largest doll, and that's, the end date, I guess, would be the biggest goal that we have on any construction job. And so inside of that, we have milestones that are on the CPM schedule usually. And then from there, we start getting into different trades that fit into that and so on. So that's all the traditional things. So at Jenco, we look at major milestones. For us, we have fundamental milestones that are usually on every new construction job. So a greenfield job has a slab on grade eventually. So there's a concrete slab, and electricians have to put stuff under and in that slab a lot. So that's activities that need to happen, obviously, before the concrete trucks back up. And so we pin a lot of those activities to that, whether it's field activities, which are the majority of the tasks that are in Fieldwire for us, but then all of the supporting activities of ordering the pipe and all that stuff, those are all in there as well that support those. So when those dates move around and we move the milestone around, we can see how much work is being deferred or compressed. So in Lean, there's a practice of knowing what you should be doing. That's the CPM schedule. And then there's always this delta of what can be done. That's the physical condition of the job. And it's an ongoing continuous assessment of the delta between what you should be doing and what you can be doing. So at Jenco, we're sitting there not trying to, we do a lot of recurring work with our customers for decades. And so we're not trying to build a claims a journal here. What we're trying to do is constraint management, which is a lean practice. So we're sitting there looking at delays and trying to get innovative and input to our client and the other trades of the consequences of this so that we can decide, to take a countermeasure to avoid the delay continuing or snowballing. So now all the way down to the work, every single thing that we put in at Jenco becomes what we call a short duration task. That's the smallest doll in the analogy, and that's the worker, the producer I talked about earlier. That's a foreman saying, hey, I need to get the light fixture in the conference room installed by Friday. How do you want to go about doing that? And the producer answers the question with what I described earlier. So all that fits together, and you can see. So we have another way to see this in this chart or this layout. So I look at this as a Kanban layout up above, and so you're seeing a backlog of available tasks to do and what the constraints are, and managing when to go into action on those particular tasks, those short duration scheduled tasks, which is for us construction put in place. That's bolting the light fixture to the wall or installing the conduit and so on. So all that kind of nest inside each other, and you can have that granular view or the very macro view all the time going on, so you can make some good decisions and influence the team of our customer and the other trades on how well it's going overall to get better at coordinating and cooperating to get the overall deadline done at a profit for everybody.
Amazing. Yep. And just to demonstrate kind of what you were talking about, if you overshoot that large Russian doll, the milestone, you'll be able to see it. And like you were saying, you've got the kind of milestone at the macro level, and then as you drill down into those short duration schedule items, you can relate them to that milestone task. And so that covers getting buy-in, and we're tracking nicely now to discuss actually doing the work, and how do you assure quality. So one of the ways that Jenco has not just lived PDCA on many levels of their company, but on the actual task itself, they put a checklist of PDCA. And so this consists of the first phase plan, and they make sure that all necessary materials are on site to start the task. All necessary tools are on site to start the task. Equipment, necessary manpower, and that this plan has been reviewed between the foreman and producer, checking your assumptions. And all of this I really see as helping reduce the start and stop and inefficiency that can happen when you go to do a task and you don't have the right tool, or you go to do something and you don't have the right person there. And it can result in safety risks, lost time. So I think this is an amazing application of PDCA on that more micro level, and in a way to cut waste in the field. But then also, can you talk about how this has helped drive quality, as well as using the verified status, how that's helped to ensure quality in the field?
Sure. So the fundamentals of commitment management are in play here. And that is, someone makes a request. In our case, the general foreman says to the producer, hey, can you put the light fixture in by Friday? And then the promise, you heard how we get really detailed about that and all the supporting thinking that we cause here in a template to plan a short duration task. So that's the promise. So it's a more profound promise that they've thought through all these components of a good promise, the resources and the safety concerns and so on. And then now you're into the doing stage of PDCA. So you're doing, and then what we find is it's the big thing that's hard to do without a structured environment like Fieldwire is able to facilitate, of having the producer, the person that actually did the work, declare they're done. It's important for them to do that. So we have a status in all of our tasks called complete. At Jenco, I think you could modify these to whatever terms you'd like to use, but the stage is called complete. That's from the actor's point of view. That's them saying, I did what I said I was going to do, I'm done. But that's not it in the PDCA cycle, sorry. We think now back to learning. We're trying to learn. Every time we do something, we're trying to learn from it. So now you need somebody to agree that it is done. That would be the person that made the request in the first place. And so that's what we call a declaration that I'm satisfied. In Fieldwire, the status of that task is now moved from complete to verified. And that's the person that made the request is declaring to the person that did the work that they're satisfied, which means quality and and all that sort of thing. So it's putting their eyes on it a lot of the times, and then doing it. We like to do it all day in real time. So as the foreman's walking around with their tablet and their phone, they can pull up these tasks and inspect the work and give the feedback. And we like to see it done face to face a lot, but we don't mandate that it's done in every task. That's crazy on a job. We have foremen that are running 100 electricians, and you can see that's simply ridiculous to think that the foreman's going to personally do a one-on-one with each producer every time they get done with a task. But the foreman and the foreman's lieutenants will inspect and do the verified status. The producer cannot change the status from complete to verified. It's the person that set up the task originally as a description of what by when is now converted into verified by that same person at the end of this cycle. Did that help?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
And that leads nicely into, the check phase of PDCA. And really, they complete the task as efficiently as possible. And then in that check phase, they're saying, was it done to the standards? And also, was the task completed on time as scheduled? So can you talk about how you track PPC, project complete, and the field bonus program?
Okay. So we have another KPI called PAR, which is an acronym for productivity assessment rating. And that's a factor on how long it took, like earned hours relative to actual hours. That's a factor. So if you took 10 hours to do a job that had a 12-hour budget to do the job, you can see that your productivity was better than anticipated. And then the inverse of that is worse. So that's the PAR score that we have. But so every single SDS, every short duration schedule task that we assign to a producer, and they are active on it, when the task is due or they're complete, whichever comes first is when they do this assessment. So now they have a drop-down menu of if they failed. So the deadline came, they're not done. So they have to answer a couple questions. They have to say, okay, what do I think the cause of the failure was? And so some examples would be lack of materials, or rework is a one that we use here at Genco. So something didn't go well, they got to redo it. So those are things there. But what that is that's from their perspective. It's a subjective answer, and we do that purposefully because we're trying to help people learn and have better control of their environments and knowing the difference when they can control things and they can't. So when someone puts lack of materials, the journey now that they can have with their supervisor is, if you had to do over again, what would you do to increase the probability that you would finish on time next time you make this promise? And so the person that checked the box failed because of lack of materials might arrive at the conclusion that, well, if I had all the materials before I started and wasn't waiting for the truck driver to bring another load of materials, then I wouldn't have failed because he got a flat tire or didn't show up or whatever that reason was, an external cause. In other words, remove the constraint before you start the work is what we're trying to teach them. And the specific form in this case is lack of materials, which is a constraint. So it's a journey with them to try to get them to make better plans, that they're more in control of the environment and the outcome. That's the environment we're trying to put our folks in, so that they can make better promises and can be more reliable from a supervisor's point of view.
All right, and we're running up against the clock, so I'll just cover 2 more things. Can you talk a bit about the field? Well, let me show the reason code, and then we can talk about the field bonus program. what Kelly was talking about, you know, tracking the delay reason, these are things that you could then show on, like if you did an export, you could start to analyze the results of this, you know, who's been late, how many times, who's got the most, how many delay reasons have, you know, what has been the worst delay reason, and start to analyze that. And I was just wondering, can you talk about the field bonus program, and then
Sure.
how you've changed some of your processes based on the results from these delay reasons?
Sure. So quickly, the field bonus is set earlier. 40% of the budgeted savings dollars from material, labor, and equipment rentals is shared in the pool with all the field workers, and all those field workers on that crew or that particular project, pro rata with the wages that they made in their salaries during the job, split that portion of the pool. So if I work 10 hours and Kendra worked 20 hours, we both made the same rate of pay on that job, she would have a 2-to-1 ratio on bonus dollars to me. So that's how that's attributed. We've been doing that for 30 years, and it's been tweaked a little bit along the way. But now, how do we analyze this data? So we throw these reason codes on a Pareto chart. So a Pareto chart shows number of occurrences in a graphical form, and on the very left would be the tallest bar on the chart, and it moves across the chart to the right. All these reason codes. So we see lack of materials 42 times. We see lack of information as once. And so we go out to the job and say, hey, how can we, you know, get more productive out here? How can we coordinate and cooperate better? And someone wants to talk about the one RFI that hasn't been answered, but yet we've got 41 reason codes over here for lack of material. So we try to lead the team in saying the money's over here. It's on the left side of this chart. So let's work on lack of materials, because that's where all the occurrences are causing failures. So let's work on that. So it moves around. It's not it's a different reason code on every job, and we pinpoint it there, and that's where we work. If we solve that one, then we start moving to the right on the Pareto chart. We never get to the right hand side. We never do.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. Melissa, do we have any questions?
Yes, we did have a couple questions coming in. So gonna ask a couple of them. First one, Kelly, if you have to pick the most impactful methods that we showed today, what will they be?
Leading people that are doing actions to reveal a plan. You know, so PDCA is what I'm speaking, but no matter what form it is, if it's on a napkin, you take a picture of it and put that into Fieldwire as an action item. You know, it doesn't have to be pretty, but what you're trying to do is I think reveal people's decision making along the way. And if you don't know their plan, then it's hard to see their decision making when they're in the action of doing it.
Yeah. So Kelly, another question, what made your company decide to go with Fieldwire over other softwares?
So Fieldwire to me has a lot of, use an analogy, it's a Lego set. You can make a lot of different things with Fieldwire. In other words, you can have a process. I'm a serial entrepreneur and been doing entrepreneur type approach to business my entire career. And software oftentimes drives the process, and I think that's backwards. I think the enterprise needs to find tools to drive the processes that they already have more effectively. And Fieldwire scales all the way out to our field workers. So all of our field installers are using the application, and that's different than you know, standard RFIs and all that stuff. That's all needs to be managed, and I'm not discounting that, but how you manage it, I think, needs to be tailored to the way you do your business and who does it. And a lot of applications don't have that flexibility. They're very rigid on the swim lanes and on the structure of how you handle different things. But we think the most important thing, real quick, is the construction put in place. Everything's got to evolve around that, and Fieldwire acknowledges that with the structures that it has in here. They're very flexible.
Yeah, I agree. And everyone, if you have another question, feel free to drop it in the chat pane. That way we can reach out to you directly after this webinar. But that leads me to my last question, and this is actually for Kendra. So Kendra, is there a limit on the number of tasks that can be imported through the task importer?
So at any given time, you can import up to 500 tasks at once. And there's no limit to how many times you do that. But it's 500 is the single instance limit.
Great, sounds good. Well, that is all for today. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Kelly and Kendra, for hosting today's webinar. We will be reaching out after the webinar, sending a recording, the deck, and answering any questions that we didn't go through today. But appreciate everyone's time and hope that you have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.